Good morning. Good morning, and it is a pleasure to be here. And yes, I have a tendency to wander around, so I realize that I need to keep it kind of within the Zoom camera range, which I can see here. So I just want to say hi to everybody that is tuning in, and welcome this morning to our discussion around talent optimization. As Randy said, my name is John Brower, one of the co-founders of Real Good Ventures. And some of you, I think, have seen my partner and amazing friend, Sarah Beth, speak. Anybody ever hear Sarah speak? Yeah, we are a certified partner of the Predictive Index of Line of Sight Organizational Health Diagnostics. Sarah is an amazing expert in emotional intelligence, but we're going to be talking about the main work that we do around talent optimization and what that represents. And yes, we also have a podcast that you heard about in the intro, the Boss Hole Chronicles. So that is our name. And by the way, we were about ready to trademark the word Boss Hole. That is our name for managers that really don't get it. It's not meant to be mean, it's meant to be quippy, all right? But we realized that you could take the word hole and put it after any pronoun, teacher hole, parent hole, coach hole. Boss hole works for us. And so while it is not meant to offend, and am I okay? Am I within the screen? Okay. While it is not meant to offend, it is meant to have an impact in understanding how critical managers are to the success of our organizations and talent optimization. Now, I also realize that there are a number of different types of organizations and sizes represented here this morning. Talent optimization knows no specificity when it comes to the type of organization or the size of organization. Organizations are made up of people. And for any of you that have read Patrick Lencioni, he talks about, messy, fallible human creatures, amazing human creatures. But that's our talent. And our job, whether we are in management or an individual contributor, is to help optimize these amazing people that are around us. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. And to kick it off, I just want to share a story about a gentleman by the name of Pete. And by the way, Pete's sort of the general name I use for everybody. This isn't his actual name, but he was is the CEO of a very successful company that works across the United States, and by all accounts from the outside, very successful. But this is one of the most toxic organizations I had ever experienced. And I was actually doing some executive coaching with this CEO and his executive team. And I remember one time I was working with him to try to develop a better rapport and relationship with a particular individual in the organization. And I said, you know what, I think would be great. This individual and his wife had just had their first child. And I told him, I said, you know what I think would be great? Just send a personal note. You're trying to establish better relationship with this individual. There was some strain within that relationship. There was some toxicity. And I said, just send him a personal handwritten note saying, hey, congratulations on your wonderful news. Hope everything's going well. Hope you're getting some sleep. And this was his response to me. He said, why would I do that? And I said, because that's what people do. That's what humans do when they're trying to be, establish rapport and an understanding, demonstrating some empathy with one another. He goes, but I don't care. That's a direct quote. He absolutely said that. And I said, you know what? Let's just table that and do it anyway, because that's the right thing to do in your role. Now, this organization had a very toxic atmosphere and culture. Tremendous turnover time and time again. And there was really no consideration to the astronomical cost, not only financial, but also from a morale standpoint of that turnover. This was an organization that was not optimizing its talent. And when we work with organizations at Real Good Ventures, we are working at the C-suite. I mean, that's where we start, because if they don't buy in, it will not happen through an organization. So when we think about talent optimization, we all have a role in it, but we absolutely need to make sure that our senior executives are on board. So what is talent optimization? Let's walk through this very quickly. Talent optimization is actually defined as matching your talent strategy with your business strategy to get the results you need. All right? Matching your talent strategy with your business strategy to get the results you need. First question out of the gate is, well, do we have a talent strategy? I mean, a very, thought out, comprehensive talent strategy in our organization. And does everybody know it? Do they understand their part of it? And within talent optimization, there are 4 aptitudes within this framework. And by the way, some of you know from conversations with Sarah, we use very specific analytics, people analytics and people science. This is not an endorsement of our science. Talent optimization, this framework works with any analytics, valid analytics, but you can't do this unless you understand that data. And we're going to dig into the data a little bit. First aptitude is diagnose. Diagnose means that we are able to track, understand, and literally diagnose the overall engagement of an organization. And I'm going to share with you how we define engagement at Real Good Ventures, and our clients do as well. But we measure this across the enterprise. We have a tool for this because you can only manage what you can measure, and what gets measured gets done. Secondly is design. Design helps us literally design teams for flawless execution. When we have individual data, we can actually aggregate that data into a team that is purposefully designed for specific types of work. So we have a phrase at Real Good Ventures that every team is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. The question is, are they the results you need? Sometimes we inadvertently give a team an assignment for which they are not properly designed. Does that make sense? And they struggle. And then what happens? Disengagement goes up and retention drops. This is why we start to look at it from more of an analytical standpoint. The third one is inspire. Inspire is how we develop tools, and we put tools in the hands of managers and supervisors to make them more effective than they are. The number one competency for effective management and leadership is self-awareness. Number one. That was the Stanford Business Advisory Council that came up with that back in 2016. Number one competency is self-awareness. Managers and supervisors who are lacking self-awareness and an awareness to adapt, those are what we call boss holes. There you go, that's exactly right. Now you see where we're going with this. The fourth aptitude is the higher aptitude. The higher aptitude doesn't have to do necessarily with people outside the organization, and making sure that we are optimizing their fit when they come into the organization. So we're hiring for optimized fit, but it also means refitting people that are already in the organization. Oftentimes, and this is our studies and our work, and by the way, we lean on other studies as well, like Gallup has some amazing stuff around disengagement. More times than not, disengagement is a direct result of misfit or misalignment in a particular role. And our mission at Real Good Ventures, our mission is to help people find meaning and fulfillment in their work. And you may think that that's a pretty lofty goal, but it's absolutely attainable if you have their data. So what I want to encourage you to think about in this framework of talent optimization, and you go back to your organizations and you think of the tools that are available, think about what data do we have on people that actually does support a talent optimization initiative, and begin to use it. I know you know what data, you know what platforms we use, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit, but it's not an endorsement of our platforms. I encourage you to think about how do we help people understand themselves from an analytical perspective and understand others around them, okay? So with that being said, I want to think about and want to share with you in our work, what are keeping leaders up at night, okay? Well, first of all, employee performance is always at the top of the list. We also have retaining talent. That is absolutely paramount right now. Anybody thinking about how to hold on to talent right now, by show of hands? Yes, I mean, and I was just out in California, spoke to a statewide conference out there, and it's everywhere across the country. First of all, just getting people to fill out an application. Getting people to even apply for a position, that's a challenge. So that means that our standards may be dropping in terms of what we're expecting a person to have in the way of skills and abilities and credentials. So now it means that our managers have got to be excellent at retaining that talent. Also, we're talking about strategic execution. Do we have gaps in our strategic execution? How do we measure that? Also, stakeholder return. The stakeholders being anybody that has an interest in the outcome of our operation, how are we delivering on the return to that? And then future state. I contend, so Sarah and I were involved in, right after the pandemic hit in early 2020, we spent that first 6-month period, I mean multiple times every week, working with executive teams and leadership teams, trying to help them develop a level of resilience to deal with the pandemic. And I will tell you that some responded effectively. Most were like deer in the headlights. I mean, we had never experienced this, had we? Nobody had ever experienced this. There's nothing in the playbook. There's nothing at the Harvard MBA program that talks about what to do in leadership when you have a pandemic. All right? Nobody was prepared for this, but some did adapt effectively, and thankfully we were part of that. We were able to help them navigate this. Unfortunately, there were far too many, sort of like Pete's organization, and I had another boss hole say this to me. He goes, at the beginning of the pandemic, said, we're not participating in the pandemic. That is a true statement. We're not participating. We have chosen not to participate in the pandemic. It's like, interesting. Not only arrogant and full of hubris, but I mean, completely irrational. This person's business in this last 2 years has completely crumbled. Lost over half of the employees. Was a small company, but lost them because he refused to acknowledge the reality of what was going on around him. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So understanding the future state. And so what that means relative to this is that we have got to maintain our ability to build, align, and grow and get the job done with thinking of these 4 things. Use objective data to understand how to how your team gets results, manage conflict and build and maintain trust and cohesion, align teams to do the work they do best, and retain and develop the talent you've already acquired. That second one I want you to think about, trust and cohesion. The word trust is the operative word here. Anybody familiar with Patrick Lencioni? I already mentioned his name. Anybody who knows Patrick Lencioni? Okay, 2 books you got to get. This is, and I don't, I've spoken at the same conference as Patrick Lencioni. I don't know him. We've had one of his executives on our podcast. 2 books that he's written that I think should be standard reading for every leadership group in an organization. Number 1 is called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It's a parable. It's a great story. Simple to read. And I like simple. Second one is called The Advantage. The Advantage takes the 5 dysfunctions and blows it up even further. So if you do nothing else and you really want to help your leadership team, or any team for that matter, try to avoid the 5 dysfunctions, get that book or those books. But the first thing organizations or a team or people need to establish is what we call vulnerability-based trust. And I have a favorite saying. It's a quotation. By the way, I love quotations because I have nothing original to say. And that quotation is this: it is a greater compliment to be trusted than to be loved. It is a greater compliment to be trusted than to be loved. When people get into management or supervisory roles, unfortunately, we don't prepare for this. And this has been going on for the better part of a century, and we got to stop this. We are putting people in management roles that are ill-equipped, ill-prepared, or they don't know what they're doing, or they have no desire to go into management. But that's the only way to advance in a company. And then what happens? They can't establish trust with their direct reports. That's when everything starts to break down. That's when disengagement goes up and retention drops. All right? So when we start to think about this world of talent optimization, we cannot step over the fact that the manager is a critical component of this. You should, as a result of this discussion, start to think more carefully about who do we have in management and supervisory roles. This is not an indictment of the people that are already there. I just want you to think about this. Are they built to develop people? That's the number 1 responsibility. When we work with clients, we say, take all of your manager and supervisory job descriptions and change the number 1 responsibility to this: develop other people. I challenge anybody to say that that's not the number 1 responsibility of a manager or supervisor of other people. If you have direct reports, if you are responsible for other human beings, your job is to develop them. When that doesn't happen, your talent is suboptimized, and that is when we start to see a breakdown of our organizations. Now, I had mentioned to you, some of you may recognize this. I'm just going to share this with you very quickly. These are the 17 reference profiles we use with the Predictive Index. Predictive Index is our diagnostic. It's our people science platform. Like I said, this just happens to be ours. But the reason I wanted to share this with you is simply because it helps you understand, whether it's this or Myers-Briggs or any of the other psychometric tools out there, it helps you understand sort of what we call the behavioral DNA of a person. We know that this one is more robust. It follows the person. I mean, this data is relevant across the employee life cycle. But the reason we do this is simply because it helps us understand when we get together who's who and what are some of the characteristics that you actually possess. Now, by the way, well, we talked about this, is that as a result of this, if anybody wants to find out your reference profile, it'll be you can get a link after this, but we'll provide you a link if anybody wants to get their own reference profile. We talked about that. Some of you already have it. Anybody know what their reference profile is? You know what it is? What is it? Controller. I'm a captain. Anybody else? Specialist. Cool. All right. Now, what does that mean? It just tells us a story. It helps us understand people. It helps us understand not only getting our own awareness, but our awareness of others. So let's think about your superpower. Your superpower has to do, in our view, your behavioral DNA. This is how you're wired. And this is exactly how we need our leaders, we need our people to understand their role within any kind of organization. So first and foremost is understanding yourself. A heightened degree of self-awareness, as I said, number one competency for effective leadership. Number two, understanding the people around me. Having reliable, valid data about the people around me. So if I'm a captain, which is known as an exploring type of reference profile, and I'm working with a controller, which is more of a producing type of reference profile, how we work together is just simple, or specialist, right? Specialist over here? Okay, sorry, my wife's a specialist. And we're at opposite ends, opposites attract, absolutely. But what happens is it helps me understand more effectively how to work with this individual. And then we can start to understand how we attack the work. Because we each have an understanding of ourselves, each other, and now we can approach the work. And then, with objective data, and only then, do we take action. But where do you think people want to start? Action. There's an action bias in most organizations. You get people together, it's like, okay, let's do something. What do you want to do? Let's do something. And we should really fight that urge. So if you think about the example of Pete and his company, very action bias and not thinking about the other things. You can have incredibly successful organizations that are incredibly unhealthy. Does that make sense? You could be delivering your services and goods and whatever it is, whether you're for profit, not for profit, whatever kind of organization it is, and be very successful on the outside, but be very toxic and unhealthy on the inside. But you can measure that. And every leader in an organization should want to know that. So once we understand our superpower, whoops, what did I do? I blanked it out. Sorry about that. I want to start to talk about these ideas of culture, engagement, and strategy. I think it helps for us to understand, or we have some working definitions for each one. So what is organizational culture? Let me ask you, when you think of culture, and nobody says, I'd like to have a horrible culture. Let's create a really toxic culture here. Nobody does that. But when you think about the word culture, what does that mean? And speak up. Go ahead. Norms and beliefs, okay. What else? The feel of the environment. How it feels in the environment. Good. By the way, I'm really comfortable with silence. You should know that. Yeah, the atmosphere. How does it make you feel when you are there? Okay, so I'm going to use the Society for Human Resource Management. I like SHRM's. SHRM is a worldwide global organization around human resource management. I like their definition. Organizations, culture defines the proper way to behave within the organization. The culture consists of shared beliefs and values established by leaders and then communicated and reinforced through various methods, ultimately shaping employee perceptions, behaviors, and understanding. I'm going to highlight three things. First is proper way to behave. These are the standards. This is how we're going to treat one another. This is how we're going to take care of one another. This is how we're going to approach our work. Second one, established by leaders. If you don't live that, it will not live or permeate your organization. It will not be part of your culture. So you could have a leader that says, well, we believe in collaboration, but if there's constant infighting and there is no collaboration, or if you say, hey, we want to get feedback from everybody, we believe in a culture of feedback, but you don't seek it out, it's never going to happen. It's just window dressing at that point. Third one, shaping employee perceptions. It should actually help us understand how we see the organization. But the thing is that this has to be established by leaders. Now, I'm going to show you something else in a little bit that helps you understand how to optimize your talent by fighting against what we call the 4 forces of disengagement. We'll get to that in just a second. Now, let's talk about engagement. Engagement is an employee's emotional commitment to the organization and its goals. Now, that's the definition we use, and we measure this when we do what we call our employee experience survey. We actually measure an employee's or the employee's emotional commitment to the organization and its goals. Because if people are not really bought in, you're not going to have engagement. You're going to have people that are just punching the time clock and showing up and collecting their paycheck. I mean, they're just not bought into the mission or the overall culture. You are not going to have engagement. And the thing about maintaining engagement and retention will result when you can fight against the 4 forces of disengagement. So we'll take a look at that in just a second. Actually, we'll look at it right now. So the 4 forces of disengagement, every organization faces these. So if you, by the way, I usually walk around. I don't mean to ignore you all over there. I'd love to come over and visit, but I wouldn't be in the view of the Zoom folks. So I just apologize for that. So way over there, you'll see that slide. And if you think about this, over time, what we are doing, we are always trying to elevate and push up on the vertical axis on the left-hand side, engagement, retention, and performance. Okay? Now, performance is the easy one. We always say, hey, we want a high-performing organization. We want high-performance teams. Okay, I think it's also really necessary to have highly engaged and retained talent. I think it's equally important because your performance will be compromised if your engagement and your retention is compromised. Does that make sense? Okay. So if you look at our 2 kinds of employees down here, we have the one employee down at the bottom, denoted in the red color, that is just, they're just doing the minimum requirements over time. They're coming in, they're punching the clock. They're not doing anything extra. You see that dotted line right under the word minimum job requirements? We call that the line of discretionary effort, which means our job as leaders and managers, supervisors, just colleagues, is to help create a culture where we lift people up over that line of discretionary effort, and they do things because they want to. Does that make sense? Can anybody think of a job that you've had, hopefully it's this one, where it's like, I can't wait to do the work I do. I'm passionate about the work. Yeah, you have days when you're not feeling so passionate, but ultimately it's like, I love what I do. That's where we want people to be. But guess what? Every organization has 4 forces of disengagement, and here they are. And those 4 forces of disengagement are poor job fit, poor manager fit, poor team fit, and poor culture fit. This sequence is absolutely essential. If you want to start to think about optimizing engagement and retention in your organization and optimizing your talent, start here. First thing is job fit. We use data. I'm not talking about I'm talking about we, okay, and all of our clients. We use data to make sure we are optimizing a person in a particular role. All right? So you heard about my reference profile. I'm a captain. Captains are known for being exploring, visionary, innovative. Let's go try some new stuff. You know what I'm not good at? What we're not great at? Detail, organization, precision. That's why we need specialists, okay? All right, and I often joke, Barbara, my wife, her birthday today, by the way. Thank you. I sent her flowers, and I'm out of town. I'm always out of town on her birthday. She's just used to that after 34 years. But anyway, the thing is that if Barbara if I didn't really appreciate her characteristics and traits as a specialist, I would have perished in some embarrassing way years ago, okay, if not for her structure and organization. So the thing is that we want to put people in a position where they're going to be successful. Once that happens, then we need manager optimization. Now, this is the one we're going to talk about more specifically. We need to get managers who want to be in management roles. We want to elevate people who have a desire to develop other people. If they don't put them in that role. And there are ways to avoid creating what we call a boss hole culture or a boss hole zone in your organization. Sometimes we do it all on our own. And then what we can do is we can optimize team fit. Then, and only then, can we optimize culture. But Where do most organizational leaders or executives want to start in this continuum? Culture. I want to have a good culture. You know what? Let's develop a great culture. I love it. I think that's honorable. I think it's a noble endeavor. It's not practical if you do not have job fit, manager fit, and team fit. Culture is a result. It is not a remedy. Does that make sense? Culture is a result, not a remedy. You can't artificially create or conjure up a culture just because that's what you wish it to be. It is a result of optimizing job fit, optimizing your manager fit, and optimizing your team fit for flawless execution. Then you know what your culture will be. So this is the thing, when you start to think about walking out of here and takeaways, this is the thing I want you to really think about is how we can do that. But now we're going to talk about this one. We're going to talk about the manager. The manager, I want you to think about a manager or supervisor you've had in your career who was absolutely awesome. Okay, just amazing. You may be in here with your manager and supervisor and they're kind of like looking over at you going, what do you think about me? No, I'm just, but I want you to think about somebody that really, that developed you, individual. And when you think of, I want to hear some adjectives or descriptions or words of those managers, the ones that we absolutely loved in our careers. How would you describe them? Just shout it out. Supportive, what else? Listener, good. Positive? All right. Passionate, what was over here? Honest. What was that? Okay, trustful, trustworthy, good. What else? What? Lead by example? Authentic, what else? Realistic. Excellent, okay. That feels good, doesn't it? It does, absolutely. Now, let's think about the other end of the spectrum. This is where the boss holes live, all right? When you think about a manager that you've had or a supervisor was like, I cannot wait to get away from this person. What are some of those descriptors? Egotistical, what else? Unresponsive. Demeaning. Let's hear from over there. Oh, demeaning, what else? Absent. Inept. Ouch. Okay. True. All right. Okay, what was that? Defensive. Good. All right. This is where, if you really want to start at a specific point for optimizing your talent, this is the place to start. I mean, optimizing job fit is absolutely critical. That's a given. We are particularly interested in helping managers stay out of the boss hole zone. But I want to tell you something about the boss hole zone. The boss hole zone sometimes is created by the organization. Oftentimes it's created by the organization, and we'll look at some of those examples in just a second. But when you think about a boss hole, what are some of the characteristics of a boss hole? All right, so here, a poor understanding of the role of a manager. A boss hole typically doesn't understand that your number one responsibility is to develop other people. That's your job. So oftentimes organizations say, we're going to promote your, hey, by the way, you're a great individual contributor. You're really good at doing that thing by yourself. So we're going to have you lead other people. That makes perfect sense, doesn't it? It happened to me. Now, I had a desire to get into management, but what I didn't know was frightening about developing other people. Until I got training, until I got coaching, I understood the essence of good management. But the thing is, if they don't understand what my role is to develop other people, they've got one foot firmly into the boss hole zone. Next one, absence of clear expectation, preparation, and training. Nobody should be put in a management or supervisory role without sufficient training. And I know you're thinking, this is about retention and engagement. Managers are the number one reason people leave an organization. Think about what's happening right now. All the phrases that are coming out over the last 6 months. The Great Resignation. We call it the Big Refit or the Summer of Quitting. It's real. Is anybody experiencing it? Okay. I mean, there are people that are just leaving. And I've got some statistics to share with you on that. Insufficient feedback and input from direct reports, peers, and managers. And manager, I mean, that person's direct manager. Feedback, we call feedback. We just published, Karen Schulman, who's on our team, she and I published an episode just a couple weeks ago called Feedback, the Oxygen of Engagement. That's what we think feedback is. And by the way, managers need to realize feedback is not just something you give, It ought to be more so something you receive and you go out and you seek it out. It's amazing though, managers that are afraid to do that. That's the lack of vulnerability. That's the arrogance of thinking, oh my gosh, what if they say something bad? What if they do? That's okay. That can only serve to strengthen your relationship and make you better if you receive it in the right way. Fourth one, lack of self-awareness and lack of adaptation of natural behavioral drives. In other words, having to deal with somebody that says, that's just who I am. They got to figure me out. Really? That's a pretty narrow perspective, because people will not deal with that. People will have no interest in tolerating a manager or a supervisor that says, hey, that's just who I am. And I will tell you right now, I have heard that from different managers, at which point we sit down and say, listen, do you even really want to do this? Do you even really want to develop other people? And I've had managers come up to me and say, you know what? I hate my job. I really like the company, but this management thing, it's hard. Yes, it is. It is absolutely hard. So it's okay for you to say, listen, I really appreciate the promotion, but I'm not the right person for this role. But these are circumstances that organizations, they trap themselves and they create their own boss hole zone and shove people into it. We need to change that. Okay, granted, there are some naturally, sort of genetically wired boss holes. There are. I mean, I will get that. Pete's a great example of one. Somebody who has very little self-awareness and doesn't really, he said, you know, I don't care. Doesn't really have much thought or care about what other people think. He's one of your authentic boss holes. But let's also think about the boss hole zone itself. Okay, that's one of our t-shirts, by the way. I love, you know, when I'm wearing mine and people are reading it, it's going, what is that? But constrained career pathways and succession planning. In other words, even when somebody gets into management, do we understand, or have we created a succession plan or even a pathway for them to develop? Now, maybe we work for very small organizations. It's not like we have 10 levels that somebody can reach, but they can always develop their skills. They can always develop professionally. That can be part of career or succession planning. Failure to ask the question, does this person even want to go into management? Now, this second one and the third one are really critical together. Okay, first of all, I had a conversation with a director of one of our clients. We were going through, it's called a one-on-one talent strategy session, where we go through the manager's data and then we look at the data of his or her direct reports, and then we all come together at another session and talk, and that's called a team discovery session. But in the one-on-one session with this manager, she said, well, so-and-so, I want to have this person report to this person. I said, hold on a second. The person that you're going to put in a supervisory role, have you talked to that person about it? No, but I think he'd be great. I think he'd be just fantastic. I said, stop right now. You have to ask him if he even wants to do it. You have to ask him. And by the way, it relates to the third one here, overlooking the individual contributor pathway. This is the biggest variable that creates a boss hole zone in an organization. Typically, and most of us kind of came up through organizations and work, hearing about the phrase or using the metaphor of climbing the corporate ladder, okay? So let's not even say corporate, let's just say organizational ladder. When we think about advancing in an organization, we think about moving up, right? That's the only pathway that was ever really available. That creates an automatic boss hole zone. Because if I want more responsibility, possibly to make more money, that's the only way. I have to go into management. I have no other alternative. We need to create that alternative. And this is what the individual pathway is for. The individual pathway is much wider. In other words, we are going to look at individual contributors in our organization, and we are going to give them a progression and a way to develop for as long as they're with us. And so, for example, we may have a coordinator or an analyst or some sort of a role in our organization, and we say, you come in, or you're at level 1, whatever the level is. And there are 5 or 6 different levels that over the years, we, through training, through certification, through different types of education or development, you can move forward. And there's opportunity also perhaps for broader responsibility, perhaps compensation, but it doesn't force somebody into management. Does that make sense? Okay? I think this is probably one of the easiest things to do and the most overlooked. We need to create, and you have small organizations or large organizations, what is our pathway for individual contribution? I'm just curious, because I do this when I'm with groups. Is any organization intentionally, have they built out the individual contributor pathway versus the manager pathway by a show of hands? Not yet, okay, all right. Maybe you're thinking about it. I'm telling you right now, you want to avoid creating a boss hole zone. This is it. How do we develop our individual contributors? How do we invest in them? How do we, and by the way, we got to make sure that our managers and supervisors are part of that process. And therefore, a much narrower pathway is the pathway into management. And that, by the way, the threshold of getting into that should be higher. They should want to do it. They should have a passion and a desire to develop other people. And we will back them, as much as we possibly can in that. And our way of backing them is to give them the data that helps them to be more effective in the training and the growth as a developer of people. Because it's hard work. And it should not be just sort of a default because, well, you're good at what you did as an individual contributor. Let's put you in charge of this team. Makes no sense whatsoever. And I'll tell you what, I'm quite frankly kind of tired of it. I really am. Because when I started my practice, my first consulting practice back in 1997, this was the number one issue. We put people into management and they just don't know what they're doing. And we are still doing it today. It is absolutely avoidable. And so, by the way, I want to share with you, Predictive Index has an annual conference, a convention, an international convention conference called Optima. And it's actually in the spring, and Sarah and I are actually speaking at it. We've spoken at the previous two. But the reason I share that with you is simply because of the theme, and it is the theme of the conference is reinvent the workplace. And we're going to reinvent the manager. That's a bold statement. Well, we are bound and determined to reinvent how our clients develop and grow managers and supervisors. Okay, finally, we talked about the forces of disengagement. So these are the sort of things that create a boss hole zone within an organization and completely manageable and trackable. Now, one of the things that we realize and is such a problem with turnover and disengagement is that we have managers and leaders that are really struggling with what we call emotional intelligence. So you've heard of EQ, that's what emotional intelligence is. Emotional intelligence is beyond sort of, it's not the same as IQ. It is your capacity to demonstrate and understand people and apply the tools of emotional intelligence to your work with other people. But what are some of the things that happen when we don't have emotional intelligence in our leaders? We have derailed careers, lost customers, wasted time, poor performance, health problems. This is an issue right now. We're encountering, and in some of the studies and the research that we've received in the last year, an extraordinary amount of burnout. And statistically, there's a high percentage of people in this room that know what I'm talking about. Because the pandemic didn't just end when you walked away from the office, did it? It was all consuming. It was like you could never get away from it. And I don't want to bring down the room. It's like, wow, this is really exciting, John. Thanks for this uplifting message. But what we have to realize is that nobody was prepared for this. However, if we haven't learned in the last almost 2 years how to deal more effectively with the impact of crises on people, shame on us. If these last 2 years have taught us nothing, it should absolutely inform us of how to transform and reinvent how we help people manage and supervise others. We also have turnover, we also have lost productivity and strained relationships, all of which are indicative of low emotional intelligence. So, what do we need our managers and supervisors to embody relative to EQ competencies? Now, by the way, there are about 26 of them, but these are and Sarah is our resident expert on emotional intelligence. She talks about the big five, okay? And these are the big five. Self-awareness is right up there. Self-awareness is what we start with when we give somebody, we use our people science. We always start with self-awareness. I'm going to skip over empathy for a second. I'm going to come back to that. Assertiveness, I mean, if you are not naturally assertive and you need to have a difficult conversation, figuring out the proper way to do that and assert yourself for that. Reality testing. I mean, really, getting the dream world out of your head and saying, okay, in all reality, let's evaluate what's going on before us. That's what good leaders have. That's a tool of emotional intelligence and impulse control. That's huge. That is the discipline of being, another favorite quote. The best thing for a short temper is a long walk. Okay, that helps with my impulse control, because if something happens, I can be very impulsive. And so I need to steady myself and adapt and slow myself down. Now, empathy. Empathy is going to be, and I'm just going to tell you, yesterday we had a conversation, actually we were recording an episode of the Boss Hole Chronicles with Jackie Doobie and Will Otto from PI. They're the SVP and Director of Talent Optimization. And Will said this, he said, empathy in our leaders and our managers will no longer be a nice to have, it is a must have. In other words, we should be recruiting and looking for managers and supervisors who absolutely understand the power of empathy, because that is what's going to be required. If they do not demonstrate this, you will see people avoiding your organizations and leaving your organizations. That doesn't mean that we're going to come in and have sit around and have a song fest in the morning. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the ability to put yourself in that person, at least demonstrate and learn the tool of empathy. Empathy will be a must-have. That's why I'm saying we're going to see a transformation in the kind of people that should and move and gravitate into management roles or leadership roles. So here's a shameless plug for the Boss Hole Chronicles, and that's our tagline: never waste a good opportunity to learn from a bad boss. And by the way, this is not a plug for the podcast. I mean, listen to it. I mean, we'd love for you to listen to it and tell people about it, but it's an invitation. We are always looking for boss hole stories, and we don't. I'm not kidding. Go listen to it. You would be. I'm telling you, you will be shocked to hear some of these stories. We have subject matter experts on there. We have other topics. But if anybody says, oh my gosh, I've got a story that I need to share, we change your name, well, not permanently, but we don't use your real name and everything. I mean, this is the sort of thing that helps people understand. And I guarantee you, we're reaching managers out there and it's resonating with them. So I just wanted to share that with you. Now, let's talk of the truth, some truth elements about talent, okay? First of all, number one, nobody or everybody wants to be part of a healthy cause. Just know that whatever your organization, people want to be part of a healthy cause. Nobody goes into an organization or a relationship going, man, I hope this is painful. I hope this is awful, all right? Nobody does that. Secondly, people, teams, and organizations are perfectly designed to get the results that they're getting. That's what we talked about earlier. And finally, leaders and managers are the most influential component of organizational success, failure, performance, and culture. So that's why I've been spending so much time on the whole idea of manager fit, making sure that we are equipping and helping people in supervisory roles be as effective as possible. That is going to make a significant impact on your retention and your engagement. Some of you may recognize this, and I want to move forward into a couple of slides that are really going to hit on the whole idea of the disengagement versus engagement. But this is one that we use when we start to think about the person. And you may have heard this phrase, head, heart, and briefcase. When we talk about individuals, our data, when we work with data or behavioral and cognitive data, it focuses on the head, okay? This is stuff you never see with people. You only get it through an analytical tool, ours or whatever it may be. The heart has to do with a person's core values, but the briefcase is what we typically see in terms of a resume and a person's credentials, right? It also is the main item we focus on when we're hiring somebody. Would you agree with that? Okay, big mistake. The briefcase is the least reliable predictor of performance. The briefcase is absolutely the least reliable predictor of performance. So when we rely only on the briefcase and even moving somebody around or hiring them, it is a shot in the dark. It is like being at the casino, hoping it's going to work out. The heart sometimes helps us understand a person's core values and how they're going to work within our culture, but the head Behavioral drives and cognitive drives, that is absolutely predictive in terms of how a person will function in a role. So what this also means is it may change the way you think about putting a person in a role. As long as a person has minimum credentials or the right credentials for this position, let's make sure we're getting a good behavioral and cognitive match to this particular role. That's when you have a higher degree of success. But the thing is, the whole person shows up. You can't separate one from the other. And then we have another phrase around this, and that's this one. People are hired for what they know, and they're fired for who they are. It's like, yikes, John, that's pretty harsh, but it's true. Think about how many times you've hired somebody that's like, oh my gosh, did you see where they went to school? Did you see where they've worked? Did you see their resume? And then 6 months later, oh my gosh, this person is toxic. They're destroying the team. I mean, they're like they're not a fit. It happens all the time. So we need to avoid this and understand how to get past that. So how do we do that? We use data. And the reason we use data, and we call it our people science, is that the ability to get data quickly will create speed and agility. And you may be thinking, John, speed and agility aren't necessarily reflective of our organization. I mean, we don't necessarily measure our sales on our speed and agility, but I'm talking about your ability to be responsive and reactive to whatever the market or consumer demands may be, and whatever your output may be in terms of your work, all right? And the other part about it too is that, and I absolutely believe this, and substitute the word business for organization. Every organization is a technology business or organization. Because you have people, you can measure effectiveness and predict effectiveness in a particular role. Analytics are the key enablers to competition. And by the way, when I talk about competition, I'm talking about competition for talent. Getting somebody, I mean, when you can lock into somebody and they know that this is a good match for who they are, that is somebody that is quite likely going to stay there longer and perform more effectively. And data are the foundation for creating speed and agility in your organization. So rather than struggle with, guessing, if you will, that we have the right person in a specific role, we want to make sure with a great degree of certainty that we do have that. Here's some of the statistics that I wanted to share with you. What percentage of your company costs are employee-related labor costs? 64%. This is why talent optimization is so critical. Any organization on average, 64% of your costs go into your people. Another statistic, what percentage of your company's value do you directly attribute to your employees? 72%. This came from the 2019 study that PI did in the workplace, and they surveyed thousands of organizations. This one I think is very interesting. This came out of the 2021 People Management Report. I'm thinking of leaving my company within the next 12 months. Look at where it says, agree with that. 63% employees with bad managers. Kind of hard to see, but the blue one, employees with bad managers. The boss holes have an impact. Would you agree with that? There's no question about this. All right? So as we start to think more specifically about your talent strategy, as a result of this, I would hope you go back and say, okay, what is our talent strategy in our organization? I mean, do we even have one? Have we even really thought about it that way? And you'll notice here in this particular one that 36% of organizations say they have a talent strategy, which is really low. So we got a lot of work to do out there. And only 24% say that we have a well-documented talent strategy that is understood throughout the organization. So go back, start to think about things that we've talked about today, the forces of disengagement, what impact are they having on us? Are we inadvertently creating boss hole zones in our organizations? And do we even have a talent strategy that is documented, and does anybody know about it? If not, this is a great thing to make for a resolution getting into 2022. And you know what? This is not a heavy lift. Your talent is the number, your people, of course, are the main thing that make your organizations function. We should at least pay some attention to how we are optimizing them within what we do. Now, this is what I wanted to get to, because remember what I said is that we focus on helping people find meaning and fulfillment in their work, and we look at this as the pathway to fulfillment. And you'll notice here, you'll see, here's disengagement, right? Down toward the bottom, but there's something in red right below it, active disengagement. By the way, disengagement, Last year, Gallup pegged it at about 66, 67% in the American workforce. People that are disengaged. Of that, 17% are actively disengaged. Anybody know the definition of active disengagement? Want to shout it out? Active disengagement. What was that? Intentional. The words I use are sabotage and subversion. And it's like, wow, that's harsh. And you think, why don't they leave? Exactly, but they don't. That's the problem. So we have 60, statistically, you could think we have at least half of our people that are disengaged and some portion that are actively disengaged. Statistically speaking, that would be accurate. And I know that's a little alarming, but it's a great opportunity for us to go, we got to change that. And we can change this through a sound talent optimization approach. So when I think about these things, I oftentimes, Frederick Herzberg years ago was along with Abraham Maslow, did his maintenance and motivational theory. I base this on that work because when I think about things, just to get people to a level of satisfaction in an organization, what do they need? Well, they need safety and security. They need adequate compensation that is commensurate for their contribution to the organization, clear expectations and feedback, relationship, and this one right here, quality of supervision. Because some people would say, hey, you got a great manager, you should be motivated. Nope. All it does is it creates satisfaction. That is an expectation, and I don't think that's an unfair expectation for anybody in an organization. But what creates engagement, motivation, and fulfillment? Things like the work itself, positive reinforcement, authentic recognition, growth and development, and the opportunity for advancement, which doesn't necessarily mean into management. It means individual contribution. So do you see that if we just made a slight modification and started to think about our individual contributor pathway, we can start to move people above that line. This is where we talk about below the line and above the line. And all too often organizations say, well, they get to work with one another and you have relationships. That's just satisfaction. That's how we are as humans. That stuff at the top creates fulfillment. Job fit, manager fit, team fit, that's where we live above the line. All right, so we've talked about talent optimization. This is the framework that you can use and begin to apply within any organization, large or small, and it's focused on making sure that we are aligning our talent strategy with our business strategy to get the results we want. And, oh, come on now. Are you holding out on me? Sean, can you? Oh, okay. Just a final thing that I want to share with you. I want to show you an office of the future. This could be a virtual office. But I believe that we are going to start to see position. Actually, we're doing this for one of our clients. We're creating a position. Okay. Director of Talent Optimization. This is actually what we see as the C-suite of the future. Now, I know a lot of organizations, large organizations, have what's called a CHRO, Chief Human Resource Officer. Talent optimization exists at a different level, different plane. So this is really what we want to see. We want to see that talent optimization up there. And as I said before, we'd love for you to listen to the podcast. But if you have a story, I'm not kidding, feel free to reach out. You can reach out to me at john@realgoodventures.com or Sarah, and we'd love to have you on. I know we have a couple of minutes left. I'm happy to answer any questions. We have about 3 minutes left. Is that right, Randy? Okay. All right. Thank you very much for this. I appreciate it. I hope it was beneficial, but are there any questions? Questions, thoughts, observations? Are there questions from the Zoom folks?
They didn't really have any questions, but they did mention death by meeting. Is that the meeting? I thought it might be a threat that we needed to report to the FBI.
No,
but
that's another book.
Yes.
Death by Meeting. Okay, Patrick Lencioni, by the way, has about 10 or 12 books. Death by Meeting is another one. That's another good one. They're all good. They're so good. His stuff is great. So that's another good reference. Yep. What else?
This is personal, and I can't keep my mouth shut in these meetings. For you guys that don't know me, I'm Lisa Combs, the OACB SSA advisor, and I would really like to have people, I would really challenge you all to think about that what did you call it? The individual pathway?
Individual contributor pathway, yep.
Individual contributor pathway, because, you know, I'm the track leader for the SSA track. And I mean, that's what our agencies, you know, predominantly are now with the SSAs. And I personally got the experience, and I think somebody over here, where in my county, I was given some ways to work in my areas of passion above the line, do things creative. It might be because I'm an individualist, and they saw that. And so I stayed, you know, for 24 years in a job that really didn't fit my toolbox. And, you know, so, but they found ways to do that in my county. And, you know, and then I found a place that let me do even more here at OACB. So I really think not every SSA, I never wanted to be a manager. I think I would have been a good one, by the way, but I never realized, you know, that wasn't really an option for me. One, I just didn't have the degree, and that was kind of but I really hope that you guys will think about how to maximize that role of SSAs, and with, you know, find those good managers, and also find ways to do that individual path. I mean,
absolutely. Any other questions? Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I think I think my title is the only one of its kind on LinkedIn, Boss Hole Prevention Specialist. That's my title. Oh my God, they're so funny. Oh, we got a question?
The question was, how do you recommend encouraging the work pool of the younger generation who have different expectations for employment appreciation and may not be motivated by longevity, pay, benefits, et cetera?
Great question. You want to listen to them. You want to give them a forum for being able to share that and understand what those expectations are. I think the workplace of the future is going to it already looks different. What's so funny is that we spent 2 years helping people perfect virtual work, and then in some organizations saying, okay, come on back. And they did a really good job. I think we need to be very cognizant of the need for hybrid workforce, and understand and to a degree tailor a workforce to what I call them the emerging workforce coming up, what they're going to need. So, yeah. Well, and the data will always apply. Yep. Nothing else. Thank you very much.
All right.